Buddy JC here, and welcome to another live stream. I know it's been a couple of weeks since I've done a live stream. Hopefully, everybody out there is staying safe. We've had some pretty wintry weather in many parts of the country this week. We had snow earlier this week, the most snow we've had in really a couple of years. We had 2 or 3 inches of snow this past weekend, and we're supposed to get another 3 inches tomorrow. So, and it's been like bitterly cold here. Like today was the only day this week that we actually got above freezing. So hopefully everyone is that's in the house tonight is staying warm and safe. Let's just do a quick roll call. So we've got Jay, who looks like just popped in to say hi. I guess we'll catch the replay. So when you do, what's up? Michael is in the house. What's up? Paul is in the house. How's it going? Jim, 3M, what's up? So, ever since the holidays, it's been kind of slow. We have not had like tons of breaking news. We do have our first Hasbro live stream next week. It was just announced today that we're going to be getting a Star Wars live stream. So, hopefully news will start to pick up. Of course, we've had a few pre-orders, Marvel Legend pre-orders. We've had some leak listings, as usual. It's become almost a yearly thing now for Marvel Legends. Of course, this week the big hubbub was McFarlane and his $40 figures, so that caused quite the stir as usual in the action figure community. Martin says, are we getting Marvel Legend Secret Wars? So, I mean, there's definitely listings for a wave of Secret Wars figures, but all I've seen is the listings. So I can't tell you what characters are in the wave yet or exactly what makes it a Secret Wars wave. It's a retro wave, so that means it's going to be on some type of retro card back. Is it going to be the Mattel type card backs? Maybe. That would be, to me, that would be very cool. Even if the wave was all repaints, if they were on the Mattel like card backs with like, and they each came with their own Secret Wars shield like the old Mattel figures did, I would probably buy the wave just out of nostalgia. Hopefully they would throw in a couple of new characters like the Beyonder or Titania or Volcano. Those are all characters I would love to see. But I do think probably the wave will consist of a lot of reissue type figures. But if they're on those Mattel like retro card backs, if they were able to work out a deal with Mattel to be able to do those with the shields, then I'd be pretty happy about that. Mike, any movie, there's going to be figures. Any TV shit, well, not any. Like, I don't think we're going to see Echo figures. We might see an Echo figure in the next Disney Plus wave, but we're not going to see like an Echo wave. But any movie, Thunderbolts, Deadpool, you don't need to see listings to know that there's going to be figures for those. So that's just kind of a given. But yes, Deadpool 3 will get some type of wave. Again, I don't know if it'll be a comic movie mix wave, if it'll be all movie. Those are just details we don't know. But I'm willing to bet that there will A, be a Deadpool figure in the wave, and B, a Wolverine figure in the wave. If nothing else, those two, I'm guessing, will be in the wave. So, you heard it here first. Deadpool and Wolverine. Power tour. So there's no Ghostbuster figures, etc. when there's a new movie coming out. Just little kids' toys. I can't say definitively that's the case, but so far, that's all we've seen. I've seen no indication of Plasma Series figures. That doesn't mean they're not coming. It's possible they could still be coming, but right now, I've not seen any indication of that. I don't think the Plasma Series stuff sold well in the past. My guess is retailers don't want to get stuck with a bunch of unsold figures. So if we got Plasma Series figures, they probably would be some type of limited exclusive release, which, yes, means they're going to be more expensive if that happens. So, I don't know. But that brings up a good point, because I've seen people ask this question, when I was talking about the McFarlane figures. Was it this week or last? I guess it was actually last week, the $40 McFarlane thing. But when I was talking about it in my news video last week, and somebody asked me, well, what's going to be next? And the answer to that is, as far as the hobby goes, is as far as getting prices down on action figures, what you're going to see are things like those Ghostbuster figures. Those Ghostbuster figures are $10 each. So if you don't want to spend $25, $30, $35, $40 on an action figure, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get basic figures like that. As far as as far as the McFarlane wave, and I'm sure all of you got, even if you don't collect McFarlane, if you spend any time online, you've heard about the wave that went up for pre-order for $40 each on the McFarlane store, and everybody lost their minds. McFarlane has 100% said that's not, like, they're not raising their prices on all their figures to $40. They're $40 because there's a limited release. They're being done as a limited release through the McFarlane store website. Now, what they didn't say publicly, and I don't think they ever will say publicly, is likely those figures were originally intended to be released at a retailer, possibly Target, and for whatever reason that retailer backed out. And so that left McFarlane in a pinch, and they opted to release them through their store with a limited release, which raised the prices on them. Do I think just to get this out of the way, do I think those figures are worth $40? No, I don't think those figures are worth $40. I explain this to you so you understand why this happens, not because I'm trying to justify that you should spend $40 on those figures. If you want the figures and you have $40 to spend, then by all means, go ahead and buy them. I wouldn't let someone tell you not to buy them, because, like, you should be sending a message that this isn't going to be tolerated, damn it. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not the message that they're going to get. If you don't buy the stuff, then the message that's being sent is the stuff doesn't sell, and that makes the retailers even more likely to not carry them, and therefore the only way this stuff gets released is through a limited capacity, which means higher prices. So, again, if an Amazon or a Target or a Walmart went to Hasbro and said, I'm not going to carry these because they're too expensive, which happens. That's why you don't see things like HasLabs and stuff offered at Target and Walmart and stuff. But the reaction, Hasbro's not going to go, okay, well, we'll lower the price on these. No, they're just going to reduce, again, you're going to end up with the basic stuff that costs $10 each. So, there isn't a good solution here, unfortunately. Companies are going to they're not going to put something out that they're going to take a loss on, or that they're knowingly going to take a loss on. I saw people say, well, McFarlane, if they take a loss, should only be selling these at $20 just for goodwill. And I mean, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. And the reality is, I've seen, as much as people like Todd's just being greedy, and he's financing his new Spawn movie with these $40 action figures. The reality is, at absolute best, Todd is going to be lucky if he breaks even on this wave. More likely, he's actually still going to take a loss, because McFarlane knows that at $40 a pop, far less people are going to buy these figures. They're not stupid. They, when they were left holding the bag, essentially, they knew, even, offering them directly through the McFarlane store, that they were not going to sell that many of these figures. But the alternative was just not releasing them at all, which I don't think is fair to people who want those figures and are willing to pay for those figures. And obviously there was people willing to pay for the Spectre figure, though I preference that by saying the individual figures that were sold on the website were likely done in a very limited capacity. I don't have exact numbers, but I think the idea was that they wanted you to buy the entire wave. That's why they discounted the bundle, so that with the discount and everything, it came out to like $33 a figure, which is much better than 40. Not great, but it's still better than 40. And then they set aside a small number of figures to sell individually. So, and again, I don't have numbers, but let's just as an example, let's say they produced 3,000 of each figure total. Each figure in that wave, say they produced 3,000 of them. They probably set maybe a couple of hundred of each figure to sell individually, and then the rest they put in the bundle. Because, and the reason why they did that is because they didn't want to get stuck with, they knew that there were going to be figures in that wave that were more popular than others. Obviously the Spectre, for me, it's hard to gauge what other figures will really be popular in that wave, because like I've seen some people say, oh, it's a brand new Superman sculpt, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but it's still just another Superman figure. I don't need another Superman figure. But you know, maybe that one would have been popular at $20. I don't know. Psycho Pirate is a unique individual new character, but he's a fairly obscure character, so I don't know how popular that one would be. The Kid Flash, I mean, they've done the Kid Flash before, so that's kind of a repeat. So, but they wanted you to buy the bundle because they didn't want to get stuck with like only a couple of the figures in the wave selling and then being stuck with all this unsold inventory. And that's what small e-tailers have to deal with all the frickin' time, is they usually have to buy this stuff in waves, knowing that some of those figures in the wave are not going to sell that well, and so they're going to get stuck with inventory that doesn't sell. They know that there'll be some of the figures will sell out instantly, but others won't. Now, there have been changes in recent years. Hasbro started doing solid cases for figures and such, but still, that's a thing that retailers have to deal with, especially small retailers. You know, the big retailers can eat the loss when only a few figures in the wave, you know, sell, and they get stuck with, you know, the peg warmers. But a small, that can be, you know, that can be the end of a small e-tailer business. But I'm sure that's what McFarlane was trying to avoid, is getting stuck with a bunch of unsold inventory. So they basically were prodding you to buy the entire wave. It had the build a figure in it, and you were getting the discount with the bundle. So even though that Spectre figure did sell out, and this is where I was going with this, is even though that the individual Spectre figure did sell out, it probably still didn't sell in like huge numbers, because they probably had only allocated a very small number of individual figures to sell. Now, if they had made all those Spectre figures available to buy individually, they would have probably sold a lot more of those than any of the others. But again, they wanted to have, you know, the entire wave intact so that you would buy the entire wave, either to get all the figures to complete the Build-A-Figure, or to get that one figure that you really, really want. And that's not that's not a justification. That's just explaining how it is. Just like, you know, the discount. When I tell you about the discount, or somebody tells you about the discount, the discount code that they offered, and that the bundle is actually cheaper to buy the figures than buying them individually at $40, that's not a justification for you. That's not me telling you go buy the bundle. That's just, if you want these figures, this is a way to get them cheaper, you know. But if you don't want the figures, don't buy them. That's really what it comes down to. But anyway, I kind of lost where this whole discussion was going anyway. But I've recently, as usual with this stuff, I've seen like people just come out of the woodwork. Like if you go do a search on YouTube, you'll see like all these videos about Todd trying to rip you off from people that have no idea how this stuff works. That's what really gets me beyond anything. Like a guy that has like 1,000 subscribers, and he's made this video with this clickbait title and thumbnail about Todd ripping you off. And, you know, the video has like 10,000 views because it was clickbait. And the guy's like rambling with all these off the wall theories, like Todd's testing the waters. This was a test wave to see if they could get away with ripping you off at $40 a figure. And people are like buying into it. Like, this guy is never, nobody's ever heard of this guy. He's demonstrated no knowledge of the industry or anything like that. But all these people, because they're mad that Todd was selling these figures for $40, is like buying into these conspiracy theories and everything, and giving these people views because, and just like buying what they're saying because they're mad. They want to hear somebody bash Todd because they're mad. They don't really care why the figures are $40. They just know that they're $40. They wanted the figures and they don't want to pay $40. And so they're mad, and they're going to give credence to any off the wall theory that basically says Todd evil, toy collector being abused, do not buy. I mean, that's what people want to hear. And I'm not telling you to buy something, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you Todd's like rolling in the money because of what happened here. Like I say, he probably ended up taking a loss on this wave, and or at the very least just barely broke even. But I certainly don't think he's rolling in the money from selling these figures directly on his own site. And the best way to know that is just think about it. I think we can all agree that these toy companies are motivated by profit, right? They all want to make money, which, honestly, I don't think is an unrealistic goal for any business to want to make money. So if we can all agree on that, then think about it logically. Do you honestly think, and I said this in the news video last week, but do you honestly think Todd's going to make more money selling these directly only on his website, and say, like, Target, Walmart, no, I'm not going to let you guys carry these figures because I want to sell these directly on my own website? Do you honestly think he's going to turn those retailers away if they were willing to carry the wave and carry them in all their stores and on their website? He would have made a hell of a lot more money had he done that. Now, again, I think this was probably a Target exclusive wave, but even Target alone is going to sell a lot more units than McFarlane trying to sell them directly on his website. So anyone sitting there thinking, oh, well, Todd's doing this deliberately because he wants to make money, it's ridiculous. It makes no logical sense. If you have any idea how business works, that just makes no sense whatsoever. And you're not going to create an entire wave to test like that, to test the waters to see if you can get away with selling figures at $40 a pop. First of all, they have plenty of sales data that will tell them what people are willing to buy and how much they're willing to spend on these things. But even if they wanted to test the waters, they wouldn't do it with an entire wave. They might do like one exclusive figure and sell it at a higher price and see how it sells. But they're not going to create this entire wave that they know likely many people are not going to spend $40 a pop on, and therefore they're going to take a loss on. It's just, they'd be out of business if that's how they did their business. So it doesn't, you don't even really need to know much about the industry. You just need to use some common sense to squash some of these kind of conspiracy theories that I see people passing around. Now, here's the real question. Here's the real worry with this, though. There is a legitimate worry here, because what I don't see people asking is, why isn't Target carrying this wave? And that is something that we all as collectors should be concerned about. Why is this big box retailer declining to carry this wave, or any big box retailer? Again, I think it was probably Target, but why is Target? Why is Walmart? Why is Amazon? Why did none of these guys want to carry this wave? And that's the answer that should probably worry you the most, because the only reason I can think of is they didn't think it would sell well enough for them in their volume. So it wasn't worth it to them to carry it. Now, I can't confirm this 100%, but there seems to be Target themselves are having issues. I've heard rumors of other companies having their exclusives canceled by Target as well. So, there might be just something going on with Target right now, like they're restructuring. I don't know, but still, That's really the question I'd be asking myself, because believe me, any of these companies, if they could get these big box retailers to carry their stuff, they're not going to say, no, 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 I want to sell this directly on Hasbro Pulse only, or I want to sell this directly on the McFarlane store. No, they would wet themselves at the opportunity for these big box retailers to sell their products. So that's just how the industry works. And as far as like a big bad toy store or Entertainment Earth, like, because I've seen, and that's a good question. Why did McFarlane go to Big Bad Toy Store or Entertainment Earth? Well, and this is somewhat speculation, but those guys might be able to sell a little more volume than the McFarlane store directly, but probably not that drastically much more. And so now you're adding in the middlemen of these additional retailers. So McFarlane probably saw it as, well, we have a better chance of making more money. The price isn't going to come down anymore because it's still going to be sold in a very limited number and without any big box retailers supporting it. And it's probably better for us to try and sell this directly so we can make more money that way. It's also possible they did go to Big Bad Toy Store Entertainment Earth and they said no thanks. I don't know. But but I have a feeling that if it was just down to the only places they could go is like a Big Bad or Entertainment Earth, they probably were like, you know what? It's better just to try and sell these directly. We're still probably not going to sell them in great number, but at least there's not a middleman that we have to split the profit with. We'll get whatever we sell, we get all the money for, essentially. And I would be surprised because, again, there I don't know, like, I don't know if these were produced in full number for Target and then Target was like, no thanks, or if Target came to them early on in the production phase and said no thanks, and so they were able to limit the production. I don't know, but it's possible these figures will or could end up at other retailers at some point, or and even on discount at some point. These particular figures, because again, a lot of people just aren't going to pay $40. You don't need somebody on YouTube to tell you that these figures aren't really worth $40. Okay, and again, I think McFarlane knows that. I think they, going in, knew that most people were going to view these as not being worth $40. Um, Hoping a few diehard collectors who really wanted these characters would still buy the figures. If there were enough people who really wanted the Monitor figure, would buy the whole wave to complete that, whatever. But for the most part, I don't think McFarlane really expected a ton of people to come in and pay $40 for what is clearly, $20 figures. So, and just one more point on this subject. Everyone lost their minds over these $40 figures, but we saw the exact same thing happen last year with the Flash movie Batwing. You may recall that Todd was able to get the Batmobile, which this was a property being backed by a major motion picture that I think, at least at the time, everyone was hoping was going to be a huge hit. Of course, the movie bombed, but still, there was probably some reasonable expectation that the movie would have been, with Michael Keaton, Batman, and everything returning, would have been successful. And so McFarlane was able to convince all these retailers to carry the Michael Keaton Batmobile, which was an iconic Batmobile. Everybody loves Michael Keaton, and I don't think it was a hard sell to get all the retailers to carry that. And of course, it sold out. It sold out at Amazon. It sold out, that thing sold out really quick. That was a hot seller. That also didn't cost an arm and a leg. That cost, what was it, $70 that cost? Um, but the Batwing that they released at the same time, which was not the original Batwing, it was a modified version of the Batwing, so it was different from the original '89 movie. It was a bigger item. Even if it had been released at general retail, it still would have cost over $100. And so McFarlane was not able to get any retailers to carry that Batwing. And so he ended up selling that directly on his own McFarlane store. And guess what? That thing, it was what, 350 bucks? Far more expensive than the Batmobile. It would have been more expensive than the Batmobile no matter what. But the Batmobile, the general release Batmobile was 70 bucks. Had the Batwing seen a general release, it probably would have been somewhere between 120 and 130 bucks. But instead, because it was a McFarlane store exclusive, it was over 300 bucks. So you can just see how those prices jump up when something ends up getting released in a limited capacity like that. But nobody lost their head over the Batwing. I didn't see anyone like making 50 videos about the Batwing was so expensive. How could he release this Batmobile at 70 bucks, but this Batwing is like 300 bucks? How is that even possible? So, same thing happened there. And, whenever that happens, you can expect that something's going to be more expensive. Jerry says, I never saw the Batmobile nor Batwing at any of my Targets. I didn't see well, remember, the Batwing was not carried at Target. The Spin Master Batwing, which was cheaper, was carried, and I saw that on the shelf a couple of times at Target. And that was another reason why probably the retailers didn't want to carry the McFarlane Batwing, because there was the cheaper Spin Master option, which honestly wasn't that drastically different. The cockpit was hollow on the Spin Master one, and you had to kind of make your own seat for a 7-inch scale figure. But from the outside, the Spin Master Batwing was very similar to the McFarlane one. So retail, Spin Master won that one, and retailers probably didn't want to carry two different 7-inch scale Batwings. But you're right. I didn't see the Batwing on any shelves, and they sold out very quickly online. So again, the Batmobile sold very well. The gold label Batmobile that was technically based on the '89 movie, which had a figure with it, had the corrected canopy, was released through Amazon, and so it was more expensive than the general release, but still Amazon's able to fill enough orders that it didn't like raise the price up to like 300, $200 or $300. It wasn't something that outrageous. And that sold out as well. I mean, that seemed to had sold very well. I think Amazon eventually ended up carrying the Batwing, if I remember, but again, what happened with the Batwing is the same thing that happened with this Wave, but I guess because as many people didn't care about it, they didn't lose their minds over it. But it was the exact same thing happened there as with these figures. So sorry, it's just I've just been seeing like 2 weeks now. I've been going at people like losing their minds over that wave of figures, and I get the price, not wanting to spend 40 bucks. And I've been pretty clear that I wasn't spending 40 bucks on those figures. I wasn't planning on buying those figures. But I guess what irritates me is, first of all, people are so easily willing to just believe anybody and what they say without any credibility, whether it's somebody who just runs onto a Facebook page and posts something, or whether they make a YouTube video. And as long as you make it a clickbait title with a thumbnail, people will tune in and watch. And if they say something you want to hear, then they start cheering the person on like they're some hero of the hobby. And every time I see that kind of thing, I'm like, oh my God. And what makes it even worse is, and I'm not going to go too much into this because I want to keep us on action figures, but you see the same mentality with everything that goes on in today's society, whether it's politics, world events, whatever. That's why there's just so much misinformation out there, because nobody bothers to check their source or anything. They just, for the attention that they can get, they just start posting this stuff. And then when they get called on it, it's, well, this is just my opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion. Like, I need you to tell me that these figures aren't worth $40. I think I'm pretty smart. I think I can figure that out myself. I don't need somebody to tell me that these figures aren't really worth $40. Now, I may still choose to buy them if it's something I want. You know, I look at the Super 7 Thundercats and the Snarf. Do I really think the Snarf figure, the Ultimate Snarf figure, is worth $55? No, I don't. But I still bought it because I wanted to complete my Thundercats team. And so I bought it. But do I really think Snarf is worth $55? I mean, I guess technically he is because I spent $55. I mean, the reality is something's really only worth as much as what somebody else is willing to pay. So yes, I guess technically, but do I really think I'm getting my money's worth? And I will say the Snarf figure was a nice figure. They did a good job with it. But still, do I really think it's a $55 figure? No. Now, there was definitely, well, Super 7 got me to buy that Snarf figure because I wanted it for my collection to round out my core Thundercats team. I only ended up buying 2 figures in that wave with Snarf. I got Snarf and Rotaro. I didn't get Wilma and that other guy that I don't even remember from the cartoon. I wouldn't have bought that guy anyway because, like I say, I don't even remember him from the cartoon. I don't even remember his name off the top of my head. But I would have probably gotten the Wilma figure in that wave, but instead I had to pay $55 for Snarf. So they lost the sale, and as the prices go up, or in Super 7's case, they've always been up, I'm very selective on what I buy. I like Thundercats, but I'm not just going to buy every single Thundercat that Super 7 puts out because they're too expensive. And unless it's something I really like, I'm probably going to pass on 90% of figures that Super 7 puts out. Now, other people might have different views. I've seen a lot of people who seem to love everything Super 7 puts out, and that's totally fine. I think if they're happy with their purchases, I think that's great. But I don't need somebody on YouTube to tell me that what something's worth. I can figure that out for myself. And I honestly think everyone out there, all you guys, are smart enough to be able to figure that out yourself as well. If somebody, everyone's free to make a video on pretty much whatever they want. So if somebody feels like they need to make a video to tell you that those McFarlane figures aren't worth $40, but I don't really understand why so many people want to listen to that. That just dumbfounds me. Like, when I'm trying to explain why it is, that's not a justification. I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm not telling you not to buy it. I'm just telling you this is why it is. But there are people that are like, they feel the need to tell you, don't buy these. You're setting a bad precedent. They're going to jack their prices up on all their figures to $40 if you buy this. And, that's just not really the case. And even if I thought that was the case, here's the thing about people in this hobby. They're going to do what they want to do. I could sit here and say till I'm blue in the face, don't support scalpers. Don't go out and pay secondary market prices for a figure. Don't pay twice the cost of the figure to get it from a scalper, because you're just encouraging the scalper. And as long as there's people who are going to buy from scalpers, there will always be scalpers. So I could sit there and say that till I'm blue in the face, but it's not going to change those when they feel like they can't get it at retail at price. They really want the figure. They have the money to spend on the figure. And so they're going to buy the figure. And if they have to go to the scalper to do it, they will. And that's just the reality of how people operate. If they can't afford it, or they don't think it's worth it, they won't get it. They won't pay the scalper prices. But since there's always been scalpers, and there always seems to be scalpers, I think it's pretty safe to say there will always be people who are willing to spend whatever money it takes to get what they want. It's small numbers. It's only a small number of people that do that, but it's enough to keep the scalpers going because they keep scalping. With toy companies, it's not quite the same thing because I mean, they can see you buying from the scalper. They can see people who go and buy, Hasbro can sit there and see people paying triple, like, and I've said this before, people can sit, Hasbro, you don't think Hasbro sees people run out and buy figures, paying twice or triple the cost just so they can have it first, just so they can take a picture of it and put it up on their social media and get attention for having being the first person to have it. You don't think Hasbro sees that? You don't see any of these? Of course they see that. And I'm sure it does enter their mind that says, oh, well, these guys are willing to pay more than just $20. But they also realize the more that the prices go up, the smaller their consumer base is going to get. Because eventually you're going to price yourself out of the market. And they know that. So they're not just running the price up for the sake of running the price up. There are legitimate reasons for why. There was an article on Yahoo today about the toy companies switching factories from like China to India and stuff, and explaining why the costs of the China factories and stuff have gone up and stuff. It's a long read. It's got a lot of technical stuff, but it's, if you're really interested in knowing legitimate reasons other than people are just trying to rip you off of why prices are going up, I highly, just Google Hasbro, and I think the article will come up pretty early, in your news search, if you're interested. Again, I think a lot of people don't really care why the prices are going up. They just know the prices are going up. They don't like that the prices are going up, and so that's all they really, they don't want to be told why the prices are going up. They just want somebody to tell you that they're not going to go up or they're going to go down. Unfortunately, anyone who says the prices can go down on these things, I think is full of shit. And it is kind of a chicken and the egg thing, because as prices go up, the consumer base gets smaller. As the consumer base gets smaller, companies have to produce less, which then drives up the cost even more. So it is kind of a chicken and the egg thing. It's very frustrating, but if you can come up with a solution to that problem, then you could probably be a rich CEO for a company like Hasbro and make $9 million. I mean, if you can truly solve that problem, you probably could be pretty rich. I'll just say that. But I don't think the answer to the problem is easy as most people make it out to be. Puppyplex says, the only figs I pay double for are Lego minifigures. Well, talk about expense. I mean, Legos are expensive as shit. I mean, I'm not a big Lego collector, so it's not hard for me to turn away from something. But anytime I look at a Lego set, I'm like, oh my God, that's like so expensive. I mean, Legos have been expensive for a very long time, but Lego seems to do pretty good. They definitely haven't priced themselves out of the market. Select Start. I've been collecting 40 years. 40 years. This is ridiculous. Where does it stop once their import prices? Gundam sells for 25, Dragon Ball for 25, anime. I'm not sure. I haven't seen import figures that only cost $25, so but where it stops is eventually enough people, more and more people will leave the hobby, and the ones that are left will be the people with a lot of disposable income. They will get figures that they really, HasLabs and things like that. They're going to be expensive. There's going to be a lot of independent figures, a lot of independent companies that now have a market to sell to because they're selling to the same market. These people that have a lot of disposable income and are perfectly willing to pay $40-$60 for an action figure, and the smaller companies that are creating their own thing that don't have the huge IP licenses, you know, they can put more into the figure itself because, again, they're not having to pay for the licenses and stuff. But those are going to be expensive figures. That, Four Horsemen makes some nice stuff, but I don't think I ever see anyone say Four Horsemen figures are cheap. They're not. But definitely you're seeing a surgence of independent companies making independent stuff that don't have those hefty IP license prices attached to them. You've got companies like Super 7 who are, they're I call Super 7 almost like they're like the mini Hasbro, because they're like, Hasbro's licensing all their brands out to these companies, and Super 7's right there like gobbling them all up. So, you're going to see that. But that's where this hobby's going. But you're not going to see this hobby, you're not going to see Marvel Legends ever return to a standard $20 price tag, no matter what. You're either going to see the prices continue to go up, or you're going to see companies shift gears and start doing the cheap stuff, the basic stuff, to try and keep kids on board. Hoping that they can use nostalgia to get retro Marvel figures on retro card backs, 4-inch, minimal articulated figures that are cheaper to make, still might have enough appeal for a retro, to hit that nostalgia spot. That's what you're going to see. But you're not going to see the figures that we are accustomed to collecting go down in price. If you have a situation like last year where you had all that stuff go on discount, and I think it's very important to know about the discounts last year, the ollies and that stuff was not there because people weren't buying. I've seen, prices were going up, and so people have stopped buying, and that's why all this stuff went on discount. No. That stuff went on disc. That stuff ended up at those discounters because the companies were way overproducing. They were still producing levels comparable to what they were selling during COVID. They were slow to pull back their production on stuff. And so basically they were still producing at this level. Sales dropped from COVID levels. They're still strong, but they dropped from COVID levels. And so all this inventory ended up backlogging and ending up at the discounters last year. That's likely not going to happen this year because they have now reduced what they're producing because they don't want that to happen again, because they take a loss on that. And so stuff is going to get produced in much smaller numbers. Therefore, you're not going to see all that stuff end up on discount at the end of the year. Now, I know some of you will tell me I'm full of shit and I'll just wait for it. And that's your right. But if you can't find what you want at the end of the year on discount, all I'm saying is don't start getting mad about that, because I'm not the only one who said this, but and I've said this before, but I'm going to repeat it now. Companies are pulling back this year on the number of stuff that they're producing so that they don't end up with a situation like they did at the end of last year. And all that stuff didn't end up on clearance because everyone stopped buying. It's just that the companies were very slow to pull back their production numbers on stuff from that during COVID. Because COVID, everything soared and slowed. Everything took a long time to get to shelves during COVID. And so you just ended up with this huge backlog of stuff. That's probably why Target is like pulling back on exclusives and stuff, because they've had such a backlog of stuff. They're not ready to take on new stuff right now. That's probably the most logical reason for why Target is cutting people's exclusives and stuff. But that's not the norm. And you're not going to see that happen every year, even with rising prices, because I can tell you, there are still plenty of people out there adult collectors buying this stuff. And I see that from this, like my sponsors and affiliates that I work. I can see when you guys click through on a link, I not you specifically, they're just numbers, but I can see when somebody clicks on a link and buys something. So I can see how much, just from me and my websites, how much people are still buying stuff from these retailers and affiliate programs that I deal with. So I can tell you that people are still buying stuff. Not at the COVID levels. Nobody's buying it from the COVID levels because everyone is no longer stuck in their house, plus rising prices and inflation and all that. But I'm not going to go in. But nobody's buying at COVID levels anymore. But we had last year and all the stuff on discount because the companies were just slow pulling back on what they were producing. And one thing you got to learn about, especially with large companies like Hasbro and everything, nothing happens fast. Change does not, you would think, okay, let's pull back. Most of the stuff is planned out well in a year in advance. So their production numbers and where they're going to sell these things. That's the other thing. When Target probably, if it was Target that pulled out on that McFarlane wave, it's not just a simple matter of, oh, well, let me jump over to Amazon and offer it to them, because Amazon's already, planned out what they want to carry of McFarlane stuff for the year. That's why we have events like that's where that stuff gets hashed out at Toy Fair, things like Toy Fair, but not Toy Fair this year. All this stuff was planned out, Toy Fair last year for the stuff that is now going on sale this year. That's why when you see these distributor lists leak out for like all the products for the coming year, like with Marvel Legends and stuff, people like Rectangular that always gets a hold of those distributor lists. That's because all that stuff has been well planned out in advance. It's not, and if there's a change to it, and that includes things like movie dates shifting suddenly and all that kind of jazz, that really throws a monkey wrench into everything and screws up the distribution and shipping and scheduling and all of that. It creates, because it's just not something you snap your finger and change in a heartbeat. Figure horror music. The McFarlane thing doesn't bother me. Super 7 ending the Simpson line crushed my soul. Yeah, I've heard from more than one person that Disney is not an easy licensor to work with. They're very picky. So I don't know how much of that played a role in things. I don't know. I mean, I'm not like a huge Disney collector, like, obviously Marvel and Star Wars, which are owned by Disney. But when it comes to like, am I going to buy a figure of Winnie the Pooh or Mickey Mouse? No. I just not a big enough fan of those characters to want to buy action figures for them. But I know plenty of people who are. Same thing with The Simpsons. I mean, and the only company I've seen that had any real success with the Simpsons products was Playmates Toys. And that was during Simpsons' heyday when it was at the height of its popularity. But I really haven't, NECA tried to do some Simpsons stuff. That didn't seem to work very well. And now Super 7. So, I don't know. I mean, obviously Simpsons is a household name. It's been around forever. But it definitely, I think it was much more popular back in the 90s and stuff than it is today. But as far as figures go, especially when you start talking about Super 7 prices, I just don't know. So I don't know if it's a combination of lack of sales or just that Disney was too much of a pain in the ass to deal with, or what, or a combination probably of the two. But you're not the first person I've heard, disappointed that there's not going to be any more Simpsons. And I didn't personally listen to that interview that Brian Flynn did with Veebs, but somebody told me that Brian had said something like they had already sculpted out the rest of the family, which to me is just like putting salt in the wound, because Brian loves to string out the characters that he knows everybody wants, because he wants to sprinkle them throughout the waves so that hopefully they keep selling. But like telling everyone, oh, well, I had these figures that I know all you guys want ready to go, but it's not going to happen now. Stinky. I don't know. Am I? I might be. Select start. I miss Toy Biz Day. I don't really miss Toy Biz days, to be honest. I mean, Toy Biz did some great things back in the day, but I mean, I think Hasbro has done a much better job overall. I mean, they've actually had the license longer than Toy Biz, but I mean, I think Hasbro's given us a lot better. Not in the early days of Hasbro, but especially in these later years. I do miss DC Direct, even though a lot of their figures were not, the articulation on their figures were not fantastic, but I do miss DC Direct. Um, I mean, obviously, like I've said this before, but like and you can see behind me, like all the comic books and stuff from the '90s and late '80s and stuff. I mean, I loved comic books. I used to collect almost every Marvel comic title there was. And at one point, I was collecting almost every DC title out there, and I was collecting Dark Horse, and I was collecting Image, and I lived, eat, and breathed comic books, and in large part, they helped me learn to read. Um, and so there are times where I don't read comics anymore because I think A, they're too expensive. B, the art in many comic books today just it doesn't appeal to me. I don't know. I don't want to say it's horrible because it just may be a style I don't like. There's people who think McFarlane art is not good, but I've always loved his art. but but main thing is just price. Comic book today costs like $5. So I don't read comics anymore. But there are times, especially like when I look at the comics on my walls and stuff from the '90s and '80s and stuff, and I'm like, man, I miss comics. I wish they were more affordable. I wish the art was more to my liking. The new GI Joe comics came out from Skybound, and I'm like, I mean, those were the first comics I started reading as a kid was GI Joe and Transformers. But I tried reading some of the IDW stuff, but I just never really got into it. I tried reading the Devil's Due stuff, but I just never really got into it. I look at these new Skybound titles and I'm like, that art to me is just not good. And so, like, I want to like it, but I just can't find myself liking or wanting to buy it. But I miss the comics. I wish comics were like they were in the '80s and '90s, but they're never going to be. Comics are never going to cost 75 cents again. They're never going to cost even $1.50 again. I mean, that's just not, as much as I would love it to be, that's just not going to happen. In the comic industry, I don't follow it that closely, but from everything I'm hearing is really struggling these days and it's on the verge of collapse. And the only reason why I think Warner Brothers and Disney even puts any effort into producing Marvel and DC comics anymore is just because of the image. They're making their money from the movies and stuff, and it would just look bad if they stopped producing the comic books that they're based on. But I don't think they make any money from the comic division of Marvel and DC. They make their money from the library characters, and that's why they bought those things. But yeah, I miss comics and how they used to be in the '80s and '90s. But no matter how much, and I could go online every day ranting about comics and how bad they've gotten and how expensive they are and and all that, but it's not going to change anything. It's just not going to change the reality of the industry and the prices of what it costs to produce those things and anymore and things. So there's just no, it's a waste of energy. Select start reviews. Comic books did get way too expensive. I cut back a lot. Currently, my third rebuilt collection is the biggest, but because of this nonsense, I have to cut back drastically. And usually, I don't say nothing. But I mean, and I don't, if you like go like I'm saying now, like I really miss the way, I don't think there's a problem with it's like if you're going, you're ranting every day on social media about the cost of comics and you're getting angry and you're not getting any joy of the hobby. and you're basically just beating your head against the wall. I just think it's wasted energy. I mean, you do what you want to do, but I think there's probably more productive things you could find to do in your life. It, and I'm not saying you guys do that. I'm just saying for people that do tend to do that. Ivan says, as some say, they probably have someone make the comics like what happened a while ago of IDW making some Spider-Man comics, but didn't go through or something. Yeah, like I say, I don't follow the comic industry that closely, so I'm not up on the day-to-day happenings. I've been seeing a lot recently about how the comic book industry has been. I mean, I feel like the comic book industry has been struggling since the late 90s, early 2000s, but I guess there were some periods during that time, and that's basically when I stopped reading comics. But I guess there have been some periods during that time where the comic industry as an industry rebounded a bit, but I really don't think the comic book industry has ever been as strong as it was in the late 90s and stuff. And look what happened to Marvel. Marvel declared bankruptcy. Todd McFarlane declared bankruptcy. I don't know. I was reading. I actually didn't know this about McFarlane, but he actually declared bankruptcy in the early 2000s. He's since paid back the money he owed from the bankruptcy, but there was a time when Todd was, I guess, broke. I don't know if Todd himself was ever truly broke, but at least his company. 3M says, I read the first issue of Godzilla versus MMPR. It, there's a there's a Godzilla versus Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I did not know that. Jerry says, "Did you hear about the first? Are you talking about like the very first Spider? I didn't hear that specifically, but I'm not surprised. The thing about collectibles, the reason why all those old like super action comics number one and all that, the reason why those sell for so much money is because the people when they were buying those comics back when they came out weren't buying them as collectibles. They were buying them to read. They were sitting on the toilet, they were rolling them up, they tossed them aside in their room. And so most of those comics were destroyed or left in not so great condition. So there's very few of those comics today that are in any kind of good condition because again, people weren't buying them as collectibles, they were buying them simply as something to read and toss away. Once something is deemed a collectible, what happened in the late 80s and 90s, maybe even sooner, but definitely in the late 80s and 90s is everyone started collecting comic books thinking that they were going to get the next Action Comics number one, that they were going to get these titles that would one day be worth millions of dollars that they could essentially sell and pay off their mortgage or put their kids through college or what have you. So what happened? Everyone when they bought their comics, they also bought plastic bags and backboards and they put them in there. They maybe read the comic once or they'd buy two issues of the comic, one to read and one to put in the bag and back so it was never touched. They put them in long boxes and all those titles, which also because the companies were trying to take advantage of the collecting craze, were overproducing the comics. And so there's still, even today, a comic that was published in the early 90s, there's still a ton of those issues around. Even if it's like Deadpool, the first appearance of Deadpool, there's still a ton of those issues that are in pristine condition that are still around. So, I always say that I don't normally collect for value because I got burnt on comic books, but and that wasn't the only reason I read collected comics, but I definitely there was a time there where I thought my comic collection was going to become worth a lot of money and that one day I'd be able to sell it for a lot of money. And while there are definitely issues that I could sell for more than what I paid, if I tried to sell all the comic books that I have and you factor in all the money that was spent on plastic bags and backboards and long boxes and all that, I would probably still sell at a loss, because even though there are some titles in my collection that have gone up in value, not enough so to offset all the ones that didn't go up in any value. In fact, maybe even lost value, because there's a lot of those titles that you'd be lucky to sell for 5 cents today. And then again, you factor in all the supplies and stuff that you bought to keep them in good shape, and I'd probably sell at a loss. And it's the same thing with toys and stuff, as people collect toys as something to be valuable and they take care of it and they, or they don't open it and things like that. Those are far less likely to truly be valuable unless unless they have their value artificially inflated. Meaning a company, if a company produces something, they only produce three of something, and Mezco was great at doing this with their when they started launching their 112 collective, and they do those like Toy Fair exclusives that like where they made in very limited numbers. And so people at Toy Fair would go and get them, and then they'd run over to eBay that night and they put them up on eBay, and they would sell for 3 or 4 or 5 times the cost. I don't really consider those figures to be valuable because the value was artificially inflated, but that doesn't mean that people still weren't able to make money off of those things. But still, when something becomes a collectible that people are buying as a collectible and they're going to take care of it and stuff, it becomes much harder for it to become truly valuable. Like I don't know, because I don't really look at the price guides or anything like that. I have, like, if it was published in the late 80s or early 90s, I probably have it. So, like, I have all of Todd McFarlane's run on Spider-Man, all of his Spider-Man works. I have the first appearance of Venom. I have all of his early Spawn titles. I have, first appearance of Deadpool. I have, so, but I haven't gone and looked to see, I know some of those, you can get obviously more than cover price, but I don't think I have anything in my collection that I could sell and like retire on. So, like I have the first appearance of the Punisher. I bought that, years ago, but I didn't buy it when it first came out. I bought it, at from a comic book store, and I paid more than the cover price. I don't remember what I paid for it, but like I have the first appearance of the Punisher in Amazing Spider-Man. I have the first appearance of Sabretooth in Iron Fist. Trying to think what else. I have like Teen Titans #1. I have the Death of Superman. Um, I'm just rattling off. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing that stands out to me that I can think of off the top of my head where it's like, yeah, I could sell this for thousands of dollars. In fact, I don't think there's anything in my collection that I could sell for thousands of dollars. There's might be a few titles I could sell for a few $100. Um, but and I mean, when you think about it, I paid $1.50, that's not a bad profit. If I can sell something I paid $1.50 for. And then honestly, a lot of those as a kid, it's really my parents paid $1.50 for, not me. But still, like I say, if you really factor it, looked at all my comics as a whole, and I've kept all my comics, like I've never sold my comics, any of my comics. I still have them all, and they're still all bagged and backboard, and they're still in long boxes. So yeah, I've never had my comics graded, so I get that supposedly makes your comics more valuable if you go pay somebody to grade them, which I think is kind of a scam in its own right. But but um but yeah, I definitely don't have something like a Action Comics #1 or anything like that. Like the problem with new comics, all the very well. I mean, that started going on in the '90s and such. Where and that's where I say the comic book companies were trying to cash in on the collector craze because they would do variant covers and they would way overproduce. And I remember I remember when Todd McFarlane started his, he got to be the writer and artist on his, Marvel launched their own a brand new Spider-Man title just for Todd McFarlane. And I remember with the first issue, there was a retailer exclusive issue, meaning like each retailer got one copy of this issue. And so I remember that issue being worth a lot of money because it was very rare because only the retailers got one copy of it. So I remember that, but I have no idea if that's still worth a lot of money or not, but you saw a lot of gimmicks like that in the night starting in the 90s. And the thing I hate the most about comics today is you'll get this really they'll hire the best artists out there to give you a really cool cover, and then you open up the title and it's got some completely different artist with some what I 9 times out of 10 I'm like, man, this art sucks. It's like, why didn't they hire the guy they hired to do the cover? Why didn't they hire him to do the entire comic? I mean, I kind of know the answer to it, but every time I hate that. I hate how they like they 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 get all the good artists to do the covers, but then they don't hire the good artists to do the interiors. They just it's like a bait and switch. I hate that's like probably the thing I hate the most about. You would occasionally get a guest artist to do a cover, but 9 times out of 10, the artist that did the cover was the same artist who was doing the inside work. But nowadays, it's the exact opposite. Almost always, it's like we've got this special artist doing the cover, but it's not the same artist who's doing the interior art. Clickbait. Yeah, it's bait and switch. It's like, look at this great art on the cover. Oh wait, when you get home and you open it, that's not the art that was on the cover. What's going? It's 100% a bait and switch, and I think that's why they do it. I don't. I think most people look at their comics before they buy them, but I don't know. But Mike D says, stop making thousands of Eternal figures. I did hear sometime next month. I forget the date, but yes, I've heard rumors of there being a Deadpool. That would make sense. I didn't even when I saw the date, but I didn't associate it with the Super Bowl. But that would make sense if they're gonna do it. That they would do it during the Super Bowl. Though I gotta be honest, I don't really get that because the money it costs to run an ad during the Super Bowl is phenomenally expensive. And I feel like with something like Deadpool, you don't really need to do that. Like if you just put the trailer online, it's going to spread like wildfire. So why are you paying like millions of dollars to run a commercial during the Super Bowl? Is it really going to bring you that many more views on your trailer? I mean, maybe, I don't know. But I'm like, that just seems like an incredibly waste of money. Maybe starting out, I could, if you were dealing with a new movie or something, I could maybe see it. But I just something like a Marvel movie, even today, even though Marvel movies are not received as positively as they once were, especially with like a Deadpool, I feel like that just seems like a waste of money. But But it makes sense. I mean, because companies still seem to be willing to spend all that money to have their trailers run during the Super Bowl. Ivan says we saw yeah. Well, Flash is like I mean, Flash just had all kinds of problems. And the only thing Flash had going for it was Michael Keaton, and it just wasn't enough to save the movie as a whole. But you had all the problems with the lead actor. You had the fact that we already knew the DCU was ending, the Snyderverse was ending. So, anyone who thought that Aquaman 2 was going to be a huge success at the box office was crazy. You know, what's the point in going to see a movie that really is for something that is no longer relevant? I mean, so that was going against it. People just aren't, these days just are not going to the movie theaters that much. So that's going against it. That's going against all movies. So, that movie just had a lot going against it. And like I said, the only thing it really had going for it was Michael Keaton. And I think honestly that's the only reason why people went to see that movie. So, however good that movie did, it was probably thanks to Michael Keaton, but it just wasn't enough to make it a huge blockbuster success. I don't own a lot of I've said this before. I got the Headless Horseman figure that the Four Horsemen did. I finally got it after Halloween, unfortunately. Well, I pre-ordered it. It was supposed to the second one that they did. I finally got it like last month, and then I have one of their horses. But that's it. I am not a huge independent action figure collector. I've said this before. I collect mostly for nostalgia reasons. So I collect the things that, in large part, I grew up with. So, which you can see clearly behind me: Transformers, Marvel, GI Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, everything you see behind me on this wall is there for nostalgia. It brings back good memories. I enjoy just sitting in the recliner back here and just kind of taking it all in. It's kind of my happy place, you might say. So I don't really, I can appreciate, I can look at a Four Horsemen figure and say, wow, that's really nicely designed and is a nice looking figure. And I can appreciate that for what it is, but it doesn't have quite the personal appeal for me. That's not why I collect. I don't collect action figures for that reason. It's not to say anything wrong for those who do, and there are plenty of people who do. But for me personally, the stuff that I collect is primarily motivated by nostalgia. So, Stinky Cat, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I started this. I mean, this is a basement. If for those of you who don't know, this is a basement. It's not a truly fixed up It's not like a finished basement. So, but during COVID, I decided to kind of create I always wanted like a little arcade. It was always something as a kid I always wanted. So, the arcade one up stuff, which was fairly affordable. These aren't like actual real arcades. They're arcade one up stuff, which, mostly, but it definitely gives you the look and feel of an arcade. Um, and I put this room it's like my second office. It's kind of an all purpose room for me because I have my computer stuff to do work. I have my review station over here, and cameras and lights and everything. I have a TV up here. I have a recliner back here. I have my video games, sorry, on this wall back here. This wall, which you can't see, it's off camera, but this wall is all display cabinets. So this wall, I've got my review studio here, but then the rest of the wall down is display cabinets with action figures. Back there, more action figures and video games. Now this is half the basement, so this is my half of the basement. The back part of the basement is the utility room with the washer and dryer and stuff. And then over on the other side of the basement is our gym, exercise equipment and stuff. So this is kind of my all-purpose. And I created this because my office used to be upstairs. Well, I still have an office up on the second floor of our house. But my wife, when COVID happened, she started working from home, and so we were both working. I always worked at home, but she started working from home as well, and her office was also upstairs, and so it was hard for both of us to work on the same floor because she's always in meetings on teleconferences and stuff like that, and I'm doing things like this, talking and stuff. So it was just kind of hard for both of us to be on this work on the same floor. So I turned this area kind of into my man cave, office, whatever. But like I said, this is kind of my happy place because as I just will sit there and listen to music and just kind of take everything in. I see some people that have rooms that like really nice collections, but they don't look comfortable to me. Like it's not a room I could take a nap in or something like that. So I really kind of prided myself on creating kind of an all-purpose room that allows me to enjoy my collection pretty much any time of the day, whether I'm working, whether I'm just relaxing or whatever. If I need to get up and play a video game, I can take a few minutes and play a video game. The video games are there as much for looks, just like the action figures, because again, nostalgia. These are all games that I used to love playing as a kid. Um, but again, it is fun to be able to sometimes just to get up and play. I don't usually sit there for hours playing video games because I just don't have the time. But I definitely, will, if I need to stretch or whatever, it's nice to be able to get up and just, play a video game. Jerry says, I have a bed in my man cave, so I can lie. That's, yeah. If the space was bigger, I would have put maybe like a sofa or something. But unfortunately, the space, a recliner is about as much as far as furniture goes as all I could fit in here. Mike D says, too much BS. Well, I can't really comment on that because I don't read comics today, but I will tell you that comics have all. I don't know if you mean by like social issues, but like, I mean, the X-Men essentially were the equivalent of slavery and things like that. So, I mean, there's always been social issues and stuff addressed in comics, just like TV shows, and I have no problem with that. Um, I think I think maybe the differences today is it's just much more overt. I think that's the right word. I was watching this documentary on the TV series MASH, which I might be aging myself here, but was a very popular sitcom. I mean, I'm sure you all heard of MASH, even if you haven't watched it, but and they were, and in that show, it was a sitcom, but it took place during the Korean War, which was obviously a very serious thing. It wasn't, it's kind of a weird setting for a sitcom, right? But the show was very unique in that it could be funny, but it could also be serious at the same time, and that they did address a lot of issues in that series. But during the documentary, one of the actors was like, the first goal is to be entertaining, the second goal is to convey the message. And shows like Star Trek, which again has always been about social change, going back to the 60s, going back, the first show that showed a black man or a white man and a black woman kissing on TV. In today's day and age, something like that would be labeled as woke, right? But and believe me, that stuff pissed people off back then too. Those actors got so much hate mail for things like that back then. It's not even funny. Today we just it's not a big deal. A black woman and a white man kissing it's just not a big deal. It doesn't really anger people anymore. But But I do think, and even in our cartoons, if you go back and you watch something like a G.I. Joe cartoon and stuff, there are social messages in a lot of those shows, but they're much more, like I say, they knew that the entertainment aspect had to come first, and then you kind of covertly throw in the social message so that it's not like hitting you over the top of the head. Whereas a lot of things done today, it seems like they just hit you over the top of the head with it. And people get angry and stuff. I mean, like I said, if you go back, we don't think about it today. If you watch an old episode of Star Trek, the original series from the 1960s, and you watch, there's probably nothing that's going to anger you in that show. But 100%, there were things on that series that angered people, and they would write hate mail, and they would like, how dare you show a black woman being kissed by a white man, and all this stuff. And it's crazy to think, but that's just how it is. But there's these things, whether it's comics, whether it's cartoons, whether it's TV shows and everything, the things that people say are woke have always been there. And I think has helped bring about positive social change in our society, albeit slowly, because we still have, anyone who sits there and says there isn't still racist people in the world is ridiculous. We've certainly come a long way. As I say, most people aren't going to lose their heads because Captain Kirk kissed Lieutenant Uhura, but that doesn't mean that there isn't any racism in the country today. But again, it was just more, I think it was more, at least I feel like it was. Maybe it really wasn't. Maybe it was just because, when I started watching Star Trek again, it wasn't that big a deal that a white man was kissing a black woman. I don't know. But I feel like if there is any differences, that's it. But as far as having these social messages, being woke, or whatever you want to call it, it's always been there in our culture. It's always been there in our pop culture. It's always been there in our comic books. It's always been in our cartoons. There's bad people, G.I. Joe fought terrorists, but G.I. Joe defeated the terrorists. We knew Cobra Commander was bad. Yeah, in some ways, Cobra and their stuff is cool, but I think, well, I won't speak to everybody, but I knew Cobra was bad. That trying to be a dictator leadership was a bad thing, I didn't need, I was smart enough to know that, Cobra Commander wearing a hood didn't make him, I'm kind of getting off topic, but the social stuff was there. But I feel like today we just kind of, I don't know, like I said, it's just more overt. And I think sometimes we think people are stupid. There are stupid people out there 100%, but I feel like sometimes we think there's more stupid people than there are. I think most people are actually pretty smart. Maybe the stupid people are the loudest, and so they're the ones that get the most attention. But I think most of us are smart enough to know, things. But I don't know. But again, sorry, getting off track. Villains are cool, but we know, I don't think I want to be, I don't, well, again, I won't say anybody, but nobody I knew was like, when I was a kid, going around going, God, I want to grow up and be like Cobra Commander. Maybe when we were playing with the Cobra Commander figure, we would start talking like a snake and going, so, things like that. But I don't think anyone sat there and said, man, I want to grow up and be like Cobra Commander. If you want to be like anybody, you're like, yeah, I want to grow up and be like Duke. I want to grow up and be like, Flint. I want, but we knew the bad guys were bad. Sometimes they were goofy, sometimes, but we knew they were bad. We knew, so I don't know. Like I say, I've kind of totally jumped tracks to what the original point was. So Oh, I agree with you. I mean, like GI Cobra vehicles were always cooler. You know, the bad guys always look cooler, I, but we know they're bad. And I've been watching old GI Joe episodes on YouTube when I like whenever I run on the treadmill, I'll throw on an episode of GI Joe, like because I usually run 3 miles, and which is usually about 2 episodes of GI Joe. So like today I watched what was the I watched the episode where I think it's called the Greenhouse Effect, where Cobra was trying to steal a new fuel that was being worked on, but like it ended up in this greenhouse and it like mutated all these vegetables and everything. And so Cobra, like Destro actually got arrested in the episode because Cobra thought Destro was crazy for wanting to use a bean to defeat Joe. But and the other one was the other one was Cobra was trying to melt the polar ice caps with some new invention, and GI Joe ended up having to stop him. But I know, but you go back and you watch all those cartoons, and you know, like I say, they had a lot of social messages in them. Um, but I think at least us as kids, we didn't really like we took it in, but we weren't really seeing it as like a social message. But when you go back and you watch it as an adult, then you start to see, oh, well, yeah, that's what they're trying to say. I've never watched Silverhawks. I don't think I've ever watched a single episode of Silverhawks. My go-to cartoons as a kid were Transformers and G.I. Joe, He-Man, followed by later She-Ra, Thundercats, and I'm talking about like, I mean, I watched other cartoons like Bugs Bunny and things like that, but I'm talking about like the superhero, you know, the action shows. So as a kid, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, He-Man, She-Ra were the main ones. Turtles I started watching on Saturday. Well, that was only a Saturday cartoon. That was like a Saturday morning cartoon. Whereas like G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, and Thundercats, at least where I lived, they came on during the week. The only Toy Biz I have, Exodus. I don't remember a Marvel Legend Exodus, or are you talking about the 5 inch figures? I still have the I still have most of my 5 inch Toy Biz figures. 3M says cartoons in the 90s were awesome. I think cartoons in the 80s were better, but of course, as I was older in the 90s, so I probably didn't watch as many cartoons. Like, what are we calling an actual 90s cartoon? Well, okay, so like Batman the Animated Series, that was 90s, right? That was definitely a very good cartoon. Um, what else? Yeah, X-Men, Spider-Man, those were all 90s, so those were definitely good cartoons. Well, I know what you mean, but it actually wasn't X-Men 97 back then. It was just X-Men or X-Men the Animated. But yeah, I mean, Yeah, X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman the Animated Series. Those were all great cartoons. Ivan says, "Oh yeah, I remember GI Joe showing every week in the morning. I remember I was waiting. See, for me, GI Joe came on when it originally aired. Came on in the afternoons, not the mornings. Later on, like I remember when the USA Network started showing GI Joe, and that was in the mornings. But that was like syndication, basically. That was reruns. Like I remember when the first GI Joe miniseries came on, the Mass Device one, and like the station, it was an independent station. It wasn't like one of the major networks that aired GI Joe where I lived. And I remember they would do this giveaway at the end of each episode where they would like give away a ton of like GI Joe brand new GI Joe toys. Like I forget what I don't remember how you actually entered the contest, but at the end of every episode they would do a giveaway for like a bunch of the toys, and like I never won or anything, but I remember that fondly. Them doing those giveaways at the end of each episode. The Mask, Ace Ventura, and Dumb and well, those are movies. Though some of those had cartoons. There was an Ace Ventura cartoon, right? And a Mask cartoon. There wasn't a Dumb and Dumber cartoon, but never watched Digimon. Darkwing Duck was good. DuckTales, I'd watch that. But like I never watched Rescue Rangers. I didn't even like I never really watched Pinky and the Brain. Um I never watched Gargoyles. Well, Flintstones was a good cartoon, but that was definitely well before the 90s or 80s. That was like 60s and 70s when I didn't watch Beast Wars when it first came out. I watched it years later on when it came out on DVD. Prominently died in the movie, and at least where I live, they never showed the movie on TV. Like they would show the GI Joe movie, the cartoon movie on TV, like they just broke it up into a 5-part miniseries, but they never aired where I live the Transformer movie. But I remember so the last season, of Transformers cartoon, and I'm not talking about the Headmaster miniseries, but like the main last season, which took place after the movie, which was the worst season of Transformers. But like I remember when they brought Optimus Prime back to well, I remember yeah, I guess they brought him back and then kind of killed him again, and then they brought him back at the end. Michael, I don't recall ever watching a show called Quack Pack. No. DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, but not Quack Pack. I was the same way, and even more so, I was in high school when Beast Wars came out, so I was not watching nearly as many cartoons as I once did. And I wasn't a huge fan of that style of animation. I had preferred the much more classic traditional animation. So and I also didn't realize that it actually had connect. I thought it was just its own thing with the Transformers name. I didn't realize that they had a connection to the G1. I didn't realize that till years later. So I never really watched it when it came on TV, but I did watch it. I bought the DVD set and watched it and was actually quite impressed with it. Yeah, I mean those are all older Hanna-Barbera stuff, but yeah, Flintstones, Jetsons, Looney Tunes, Popeye, Woody Woodpecker, those I all watched as kids. Duke didn't die. He was revived at the very end. They were going to kill Duke, but they decided not to because all the kids cried when they killed Optimus Prime in the movie. I watched Captain Power on a rare occasion, but it was not something I watched on a regular basis. Laser Tag, Robotech, Voltron, those are all shows I never really watched. I watched GoBots occasionally, but not a lot. I mean, I watched Dungeons and Dragons. I watched what was it called the Saturday Supercade with like Donkey Kong and other video game characters. And there was the Pac-Man cartoon. I remember that. Obviously, the Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. I'd always watch that. I watched Smurfs. I don't know why I watched Smurfs, but I did watch Smurfs. Mike, no. In fact, I've never watched. I've watched all the original Beast Wars. I did not watch anything beyond the initial Beast Wars. So no, I've not actually watched Beast Machines. I watched. I started watching. Like I watched Transformers Red when it came out here in the United States, and then I watched Transformers Armada. Yeah, Rodimus Prime always annoyed me. I never, not as much as Galvatron. I mean, I loved Galvatron in the movie, but in the TV series, he had just annoyed the crap out of me. And Rodimus with his whining was the same way. I never watched Snorks very much. Again, I did watch Smurfs, but not Snorks. Like I maybe watched an episode or two, but it wasn't something I watched regularly. And being told Beast Machines is fucking amazing. I have a few of the toys from Beast Machines, but I never watched the cartoon. So that was the movie. And I did like when Starscream came back as a ghost. And I liked how they brought Starscream into Beast Wars as a ghost. Like, that was a great connection part. I always wanted Starscream to get his body back. I always, like, it was like, is he going to get his body back? And then he never did. Like, he almost did, but then the three of them. The only Darkstalkers I know, I don't remember a cartoon. I remember the Marvel comic title, but I don't remember. I have a, I thought Leonard Nimoy in the movie did a great job voicing Galvatron. Yeah, they killed off Wheeljack, they killed off Brawn, they killed off Windcharger, they killed off Ironhide and Prowl. I remember the Rambo cartoon. I don't remember a Karate Kid cartoon. I watch Cops occasionally, and Inspector Gadget, that was one I would watch. Thundercracker. My first Transformer toys were I got both Megatron and Optimus Prime at the same time. Cheers. Yeah, for hundreds of years the Autobots survived, and in one incident half of them yeah. Suddenly Starscream learned how to aim his gun. Never watched Yu-Gi-Oh! No. Pokemon, never watched Pokemon. Hated Power Rangers. Never was into Power Rangers. All right, well, it's getting late. It's almost 9 o'clock. So I think we're going to call it a night here. But as always, guys, appreciate you guys listening to me ramble. Um, yeah, it's always appreciated. I'll be back tomorrow with the news video. Though, like I said, so I think we're supposed to get like 3 to 4 inches of snow tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. And that's not really a lot, but like I said, it's been a couple years since we've gotten any kind of real snow around here. So like I said, we'll see how it goes. But as always, guys, stay safe out there. Have a great weekend. Until next time, guys, I'll catch you later.
Hey, thanks for watching today's video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so alerted every time I upload a new video. And be sure to head over to the Toy News International and Marvelous News Message Boards communities. It's a great place to talk toys and win cool contests like $100 store credits to Big Bad Toy Store. And remember, action figures are great.